ThinkPod, an initiative by A&M Global.
Welcome to our podcast A&M ThinkPod, where we unravel complex legal issues and topics and make them accessible to everybody. This is Gaurav Suryavanshi, Senior Associate at A&M Global, and we have with us today Ms. Shikha Ginodia, who is a partner at A&M Global handling the IBC practice in A&M Global. Today we will be dwelling into the issues that not only affects individuals but also affects finances and businesses alike, that is personal guarantee insolvency laws in India. Whilst dealing with these topics, we will be covering the key legal principles, the procedures involved in these laws, as well as the precedents that are set out by the honorable courts in India. Ms. Shikha, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you for discussion.
Thank you, Gaurav. I'm really pleased to be here in this podcast. Thank you so much.
So Shikha, to begin with, we have seen that the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in India was introduced in 2016, whereas the personal guarantee laws, which forms part 3 of the IBC Code, was formulated after a notification in 2019. Could you share some views on as to what has been the journey from 2016 to 2019 in this implementation?
Yes, Gaurav. The code always envisioned both personal insolvency and corporate insolvency. However, the initial thought process was to do the implementation in a phase-wise manner. So initially the corporate insolvency was notified, whereas the laws related to personal insolvency, be it individual or partnership firm, was not notified. But I guess with the time, with the influx of time, it was realized that personal guarantor laws and corporate debtor laws go hand in hand. There was also in fact a report of on individual insolvency which kind of emphasized that how both of them play an important role, both of them has an intrinsic relationship.
Correct.
This was more because somewhere the creditors were not recovering their dues. In fact, there was one of the IBBI newsletter which mentioned the creditors are taking a haircut to the extent of 68%. So that was a huge haircut the creditors were taking, and they were not having any alternate remedy. So alternate remedy for the creditors to recover their dues became need of the hour. So I guess that was something which led to this notification being notified with regard to personal guarantors in 2019.
I see. So upon the implementation of the notification in 2019, we saw that the constitutionality of these very notifications were challenged.
That's true.
Could you share some views on these challenges?
In my view, that was because that in Indian context, especially where the companies are mainly promoter driven, over here mostly the personal guarantees are given either by the promoter himself, their relatives, their kith or kin. So lot of time when these guarantees were given earlier before the code notified these provisions, the recovery from those personal guarantors were difficult. It was not having a time frame, it was not having that effect which it should be. So it was a grueling issue for the creditors that even after having the personal guarantee, they were not able to recover the dues from the personal guarantor. So when these provisions were notified, personal guarantors probably realized that now they cannot get, scot free from these provisions or the guarantee which has been given by them. Because now in personal guarantee provision under IBC code, the interim moratorium is applicable right from day one. Plus there is also a bankruptcy trustee which is appointed. There is timelines which is attached to it. And especially when we have already seen the landscape of corporate insolvency and how the recoveries are being made in a time frame manner.
Correct.
I guess that led some to kind of threats to the personal guarantors, which also led to so many challenges. So that was the reason that we had so many challenges with regard to these provisions.
I see. So these challenges that you set out, I believe that there was one landmark judgment which was dealt by the Honorable Supreme Court, being Lalit Kumar Jain versus
That's
Union
true.
of India,
Yes.
which was the first very of its judgments which dealt with the challenge to the constitutionality. Could you share some views on this judgment that was delivered by the Honorable Supreme Court?
Yeah, so see, just to take a step back before deep diving into the judgment, earlier in the code, there was a section 2E which was defining that the code is applicable to individuals and partnership firm. So the code mentioned that 2E is applicable to individual and partnership firm. Also, there was a part 3 which mentioned that the adjudicating authority for individual was the DRT code. Section 60 of the code mentioned that the adjudicating authority for personal guarantors to corporate debtor is NCLT tribunal. So there was kind of inconsistency, or you can say ambiguity, with regard to what is the forum for personal guarantor, because end of the day the personal guarantors are also individual. So why this notification, it was amended and section 2E became the personal guarantors to the corporate debtor. There was an introduction of 2F, 2G, which was partnership firm and proprietorship firm, and individual beside section 2E. So this was the modification amendment which was preliminarily brought through this notification. So this was challenged by various writ petition, which was put at rest by Lalit Kumar Jain judgment. Lalit Kumar Jain judgment, the apex court held that these provisions are not ultra virus, and there is these provisions very much is in the line of the object of the code, that is the liability of the personal guarantor and the corporate debtor is coextensive.
So when we talk about this issue of coextensive, we have seen that under the Indian contract law as well, the liability of a surety is considered to be coextensive to that of the principal debtor. Could you share some views on exactly what happens in cases of insolvency and bankruptcy for personal guarantors? Will this liability of personal guarantors be coextensive to that of the principal debtors?
Yes. So there are various apex court judgment which says that the liability is coextensive, including Lalit Kumar Jain judgment. There is various other judgment. In fact, in Mahendra Kumar Jajodia judgment, the apex court held, the NCLAT held that not only you need to first go against the corporate debtor, you can directly go against the personal guarantor. So in Jajodia judgment, the NCLAT clearly held that without even going against the corporate debtor, one can file proceeding against the personal guarantor. So this was a huge clarification. I remember when we were handling so many cases with regard to personal guarantors, there was a lot of confusion whether we have to first file section 7 against the corporate debtor to then enable us to go against the personal guarantor. So this was definitely a huge clarification by Jajodia judgment, saying that you can directly go against the personal guarantor even without going to corporate debtor.
Oh, that's a clarification. So since we have clarified that you can directly proceed against the personal guarantor, could you share your views on what exactly are the procedures involved when we have to proceed against a personal guarantor from a creditor standpoint of view?
So, a creditor, if they want to go and invoke a personal guarantee, so the first step is invoke a personal guarantee. Secondly, once the personal guarantee is invoked as per the contract of guarantee, then demand notice need to be issued under the code. Thereafter, a petition can be filed either through by the creditor himself or through a resolution professional. Once the application is filed, after hearing, the court then appoints a resolution professional. Resolution professional then gives his report and give his recommendatory report to the court whether the matter should be admitted or not. Thereafter, the personal hearing is been given to the personal guarantor. Once after hearing the personal guarantor, the court then decide whether to admit or not admit, that is whether to reject the application. So this is the preliminary process being followed while application is filed for personal guarantor against personal guarantors.
Shikha, I believe that limitation is one important factor before any cause of action is
That's
taken
true.
against a person. In cases of personal guarantors, when exactly does this limitation point kick in? Could you please shed some light on that?
So in case of personal guarantee, the limitation kicks in. So actually, it's more depending on the contract. See, personal guarantee, the right you get from the contract. So suppose if the contract mentions that it is on demand guarantee, that is once the creditor asks the personal guarantor to pay the amount, then the personal guarantor needs to pay. So then the default period is the day when you raise the demand and not the date when the default actually happened. In fact, there are various judgment also which has further clarified this, that it all depend on the contract, what are the terms of the guarantee, what has been given. If it says that it is on demand, it is the date when the default starts.
While dealing into the provisions of the procedures for invoking a personal guarantee against a personal guarantor, what are the challenges that you see in these procedures?
So a lot of the issues have already been clarified by various judgment of the apex court, NCLAT and NCLT. However, there is one thing which I think still need to be tested. Like in case of personal guarantors, there is no clawback period. So if the personal guarantor deals with the assets of his personal assets before the RP is appointed, what happens in such case? So unlike the CRP of the corporate debtor, we do not have provision with regard to clawback period in case of personal guarantor. So I guess with time and on case to case basis, we are still awaiting this clarification. So right now this is one challenge which I could foresee with regard to personal guarantor insolvency.
Shikha, these provisions have been challenged, and the constitutionality of these provisions was again challenged by the Supreme Court, before the Supreme Court, in two cases. One is before the Lalit Kumar Jain versus Union of India, and one is the judgment of Dilip Jivrajka. Could you please tell our viewers what exactly was dealt with in the Dilip Jivrajka judgment by the Supreme Court?
Yeah. So Dilip Jivrajka judgment was a huge stepping stone in the laws of personal guarantee because for a long time, the courts were staying the proceeding against the personal guarantor because the personal guarantor had challenged the provision once again, saying that they are against the principle of natural justice. The personal guarantor claimed that they are against the fundamental rights of the personal guarantors because a fair chance of hearing is not being given to them. They also claim that the RP, that is the resolution professional which is appointed, is giving the report without even hearing them. They also said that these provisions are retroactive in nature. So lot of these petitions were filed. In fact, there were total 384 petitions which were filed, and which why this Dilip Jivrajka judgment was dismissed by like the apex court dismissed all the 384 petitions and upheld the provision of personal guarantors, that is section 95 to 90 to 100, section 100. The apex court upheld all these provision and said that it is not against the principle of natural justice.
So, according to you, what could be the rationale which the Supreme Court followed while dismissing these writ petitions against the provisions?
So, Supreme Court gave various findings through this judgment. One of it was that the interim moratorium, which is being implicated right at the filing of the Section 95 petition against the personal guarantor, is quo debt and not, it's unlike the Section 14 moratorium where the entire assets is being taken under control of the resolution professional. The Supreme Court also clarified that these powers which are there with the resolution professional are more like a facilitator. It is not really adjudicatory in nature. The court clarified that the provisions are not retroactive. The court also clarified that the personal guarantor are given hearing after the report is being filed by the resolution professional. So, a lot of these clarifications were given through this judgment, and all the challenges which were made against the provision were put at rest. So, this was really a stepping stone in the landscape of personal guarantee laws of India.
So, when the Supreme Court says that these laws are not retroactive in nature, will personal guarantees given prior to 2019 be brought under the ambit of Part 3 of the IBC?
Yes, absolutely, Gaurav. Even the personal guarantee given prior to 2019 will come within the ambit of personal guarantee insolvency under IBC code. In fact, that was one of the challenge in Dilip Jivrajka judgment. But the court held that just because a part of cause of action is held before the provisions were enacted, it does not mean that it is ultra virus, and hence it cannot be mean that it is retroactive. So the court gave a finding that the provisions are not retroactive in nature.
Understood. So, when the Supreme Court says that the role of an RP is facilitative in nature and not adjudicatory, what exactly is the line of thought of the Supreme Court behind this statement?
So, what the apex court meant by saying that it is not adjudicatory, because the report of the RP, the resolution professional, is not binding on the court. The court can still go ahead and dismiss the petition against the personal guarantor. So it is more in the nature of facilitative. Also, the court clarified the role played by the resolution professional when a corporate debtor is taken to the insolvency, because they take the control of all the assets of the company vis-a-vis the control being taken by the RP, where he has to initially just prepare the report and give a recommendatory report to the court which is non-binding in nature. So hence the court held that it is facilitative in nature and not adjudicatory.
So when we mean by the term recommendatory in nature, it means that it is the discretion of the adjudicating authority to either accept it or reject it.
That's true, that's true.
So this part of personal guarantors being given a hearing, do you think that this hearing part is punitive in nature?
No, that's a tricky question, but in my view, Gaurav, it's not. If you see the positive side of it, it also give a chance to the personal guarantor to, it gives a framework to the personal guarantor to also manage all his liability. See, there were earlier no laws where the personal guarantor could also manage all his liability under one roof.
Correct.
He has to go either for civil court, that there can be a proceeding against him. In civil court, there can be a proceeding against him. In SARFAESI laws, there can be any number of proceeding against him. But now there is a single proceeding where all the claims are filed. He can, really give a repayment plan along with the resolution professional and manage all his liability. So it was definitely a good framework for the personal guarantors also, a kind of second chance given to him to manage all his liability. So it's not really that punitive if you see in a positive sense. That's my view.
Okay. One more point, since we have dealt with the punitive part, we often see that once the corporate insolvency process of a corporate debtor is complete and the creditor receives its money, in such a situation, will that creditor still have a right to proceed against the personal guarantor?
Yes, the personal guarantor will still be liable. His liability does not get extinguished on payment being made in a case of corporate debtor. So, for example, suppose if a creditor has given a rupees 100 to a corporate debtor and also have taken a personal guarantee for that particular loan, still in these kind of cases, suppose if the corporate debtor goes into CRP or insolvency and a resolution plan is given where the same creditor gets assuming rupees 30 out of rupees 100. So in such case, the creditor can still go against the personal guarantor for the balance 70 rupees with regard to its debt. So the liability of personal guarantor does not get extinguished on certain payment being made by the corporate debtor through the resolution plan. This was also clarified recently in BRS Venture judgment case, where the court clarified the same point that just because certain amount is being paid in the CRP of the resolution plan, it does not extinguish the liability of the personal guarantor.
So, as far as accepting the insolvency against a personal guarantor is concerned, are there any instances where the resolution professional has in fact recommended that CIRP be initiated against the personal guarantors, whereas the adjudicating authority has rejected the RP's report?
Yes, so there are instances, in fact, as per recent data given by IBBI, there are various cases which has been dismissed not only after the report has been given, but even at the stage of filing. So assuming the creditor files a case against the personal guarantor, even before appointing an resolution professional, there are various cases which has been dismissed or withdrawn. After the report has been given by the resolution professional, even then after hearing the personal guarantor, if the court finds that it is not following the due provisions of the law, there are instances where it has been dismissed. If I have to give you one example, that would be that suppose if the demand notice or the notice which is required under the code has not been served upon the personal guarantor, in such case, which is a statutory requirement under the code, in such case the court will be dismissing the petition if it is not been served and the personal guarantor has proved that the notice was never served. So there are instances, various instances where it is dismissed even after the resolution professional gives his positive report.
So it is important that all boxes are ticked in before
Yes.
any process
Yes,
of
that has to be.
insolvency has been initiated against personal guarantors. So Shikha, once this report is accepted by the adjudicating authority, what are the procedures that are involved about the insolvency of the personal guarantors?
So once the matter is admitted, the RP resolution professional issue a public notice. The claims are invited just like in the CRP process for corporate debtor. The claims are invited. A list of creditors has been made. List of all the assets has been made. After that, the personal guarantor along with the resolution professional prepares a repayment plan. If the repayment plan is within the provisions of the code and it is acceptable to the creditors, then the same is been approved by the creditors. Thereafter, it is filed before the adjudicating authority, and once the adjudicating authority approves the repayment plan, then the personal guarantor can be discharged from his personal liability.
So, in a situation where there is a requirement of a repayment plan, what happens if a personal guarantor does not provide for a repayment plan or does not adhere to a repayment plan after providing the same?
So, suppose if a repayment has been given and the repayment plan is not fine with the creditors, or they do not approve the plan, or assuming the repayment plan itself has not been given by the personal guarantor, or if the repayment plan has been given but not adhered to by the personal guarantor, in all such cases the creditor can then file a IA with regard to bankruptcy. So then he can file a bankruptcy proceeding against the personal guarantor if the repayment plan does not go as per the requirement.
Understood. So in cases where there are multiple personal guarantors, is it possible or is it feasible that a group repayment plan is given by these multiple personal guarantors?
Yes, there are instances. In fact, recently in NCLT Ahmedabad, there was a case where 5 personal guarantees were grouped together and they gave one plan which was duly approved by NCLT Ahmedabad. So if the plan is complied with all the provisions of the code as required, then a group plan can be given by all the personal guarantors to the corporate debtor.
Understood. So there is one provision wherein multiple personal guarantors do have a provision for providing a group repayment plan.
Yes.
So can we say that legal heirs of personal guarantors can also be held liable for the liabilities of a personal guarantor?
That's an interesting question, Gaurav. No, the legal heirs cannot be held liable. In fact, I recall one of the judgment of NCLT Kolkata where this point was before NCLT Kolkata, and the court held that the personal guarantor's legal heirs cannot be held liable unless there is some estate of the personal guarantor which has devolved upon the legal heir. Otherwise, in its individual capacity, the legal heir cannot be liable for the personal guarantor liability. No.
So now that we have discovered a lot of provisions, do you really think that the personal guarantor laws that are existing are a game changer for the financial creditors?
Absolutely. It's 100% a game changer because it gives a very effective tool to the creditor to recover their dues. It's an alternate remedy today for the creditors. It also gives quite a good confidence in the eyes of the creditors to recover their dues. And if you see the data, there has been so many cases which has got settled and very few cases which has actually gone into bankruptcy. There must be hardly few. So definitely it is proving very positive for the creditors, and it's a game changer for creditors.
That's great. Before we coming to our closing question, we would like to know your views on cross-border insolvency that has been quite a topic of deliberations amongst creditors.
So cross-border definitely is the need of the hour. We all have been talking about the same since quite long. In fact, there is also Insolvency Law Committee report which emphasized the need of the cross-border insolvency and given a detailed report on the same. So as and when it is implemented, definitely it will be another huge step in the landscape of insolvency and bankruptcy law. However, I would like to make one point over here that the courts have been taking very positive approach even on case-to-case basis. Even though the cross-border insolvency laws has still not been notified, the courts have in case-to-case basis, in few cases where such instances had arisen, they had taken a positive approach and they have given a solution-oriented approach to the matter. So yes, as and when, but to answer your question, whenever it is being notified, it will be definitely a huge step.
I see. We often see that the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, that is the IBBI, sets out in their reports that there should be some alternative for settlement. One such alternative being mediation. Do you really think that mediation is a mechanism which should be inculcated in the insolvency laws in country?
Yes, mediation is a great tool. If it's implemented properly, definitely it give really good results. Though in India we still do not have so much of awareness, we still do not have that kind of infrastructure which is required for mediation. But I'm sure the day it is implemented in a proper sense, definitely it will be a great tool and an alternate tool basically to resolve the matters. Not only in insolvency but all other cases, it can prove a great tool to resolve the matters.
Well, thank you so much, Shikha, for your insightful
Thank you,
views.
Gaurav.
That was quite an indeed engaging experience for us. That was for today. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to follow for weekly content ahead. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much.
A&M ThinkPod, an initiative by A&M Global.